Good evening, everyone, and welcome to St. Matthew's. I'm Bob Traeger, music director here, and we're very happy that you chose to be with us on this beautiful summer evening. We are very happy tonight to be presenting Sean Maxwell here, who is a new friend here because I was introduced to him and made aware of him by another friend of our congregation. And it's been really a joy getting to know him and to hear him play. And tonight, of course, he's going to play some wonderful music from the time of Bach and before, and a little bit after even. And I think it's safe to say that Johann Sebastian Bach in his time did not have an organ like this. In fact, he would have been pretty surprised to hear some of the sounds coming out of it. Nevertheless, I think that if we could transport Bach from the other side here, he might say, go for it. And indeed, Sean has decided to do just that with many of these beautiful pieces. And he will actually be saying a fair amount about the pieces, especially the chorales that he will be playing here for us. And we hope that you will linger afterward and greet him here in the front of the church. He is going to take a very short break before the first Bach piece on the program, that is the Prelude in A minor. It will be right after the Zachow Chorale, Nun kommt der Heiland, and then he will come back for us. So once again, welcome, and we hope that you will consider yourself, an open invitation to the remaining 3 concerts in the summer series, the next of which is coming on the 25th of this month. So please join me now in welcoming Sean Maxwell.
Thank you all for coming. As you just heard, my name is Sean Maxwell. I'm originally from the New Martinsville area. However, since 2005, I have worked as organist at Baumgartenberg Monastery in Austria. I also work extensively with the United Kingdom Latin Mass Society, providing early music for the Catholic Mass as it was celebrated before the reforms of the 1960s. And I work with the liturgical choir of the city of Porto in Portugal. Music from these groups will be reflected in this evening's program. The first piece on the program is the Song in 4 Voices, written by Carreira. He was organist at the Augustinian monastery in Coimbra in Portugal. This past year I did a recital tour of Porto and Coimbra and Barcelos, and Carreira was played in Coimbra at the monastery where he was organist on his organ, which was quite a special evening for me. Obviously here in Wheeling we do not have an organ from the 16th century or the 17th century. However, the people here are very fortunate to have a state-of-the-art instrument. Despite being a modern electric action organ, it has a plethora of collars available to the organist, and if wanted, you can also alter the tuning and temperament of the instrument to suit tuning and temperament styles of the Renaissance and the Baroque. And you'll hear a very colorful program this evening. The idea was to show off as many callers of this organ as possible. Some of this literature is perhaps not so common on organ recitals here in the States. However, it shows off all of the instrument's possibilities. There are 145 stops on this instrument, so we could go on for days trying to show what the instrument can do. But I hope you enjoy. I'm going to play the first 2 pieces on the program, the Song in 4 Voices by Carreira and the Queen's Alman by William Byrd. Note that the pieces that you are about to hear are on instruments, they were written for instruments in Portugal and in the UK, and therefore they do not use the feet pedals. That was not an aspect of English and Portuguese organ building until the middle of the 19th century. So these are called manualita, which means only the manuals of the organ are used. So you will not see in this beginning any feet work. We're now going to move to the German school of organ, particularly the North German school. The composer Dieterich Buxtehude was one of the most important organists in the second half of the 17th century in northern Germany. It's debatable about where he came from. The area is now part of Sweden, but at the time of his birth it was a question whether or not it belonged to Schleswig-Holstein, a principality in northern Germany, or the Danish court. At any rate, he spoke a sort of Danish high North German dialect and had a position for most of his life in Lübeck in the very north of modern-day Germany. He was in charge of all of the liturgical music going on in the city in more than 4 churches, and he was the organist at the cathedral. When Bach was a young organist at his first position in Arnstadt in central Germany, Buxtehude was all the rage. He was the most important organist throughout the country, and Bach wanted to study with him. So he got leave from his employers in Arnstadt and went up to Lübeck. He was given 4 weeks leave. However, he ended up staying for 4 months without informing his employers. That, of course, was an issue. But there is quite a funny story to go along with Bach leaving Lübeck. So, Mr. Buxtehude had several daughters, the oldest of which was unmarried. And by all accounts, the oldest daughter was not a very pleasant person to be around, quite a temper, not particularly easy on the eyes, as is said. And the father knew this, so he made a deal with the city council that when he retires, whoever takes over the post as organist and music director for the city also has to marry the eldest daughter. And Bach got word of this deal and consequently packed his bags and returned to Arnstadt. So I'm going to be playing his chorale prelude, Jesus Christus, Unser Heiland. At first I will play the choral melody, and then I will play the prelude. A unique aspect of German organ writing is that many of these works are based on Lutheran chorales. Jesus Christus, Unser Heiland is a 16th century chorale directly out of the Reformation. It more or less stems from an original Gregorian chant, and it was taken by Martin Luther and some of his contemporaries and turned into a Lutheran hymn. So I will play the hymn melody so you recognize it in the prelude, and that will be immediately followed by the prelude. Following that, you'll hear the chorale prelude Vater, Unser im Himmelreich, which is the German translation of the Lord's Prayer. It was written by Georg Bohm. Georg Bohm was organist in Lüneburg, only a few miles down the road from Lübeck, also a very important organist. Young Bach went after his parents died when he was 9. He was shipped off to his brother down the road. His brother didn't care much for having him there, and so he got a scholarship to go to the boarding school in Lüneburg and had direct contact with Georg Bohm. And up until recently, it was unknown if Bohm was one of the teachers of Bach. And fortunately, we've, in the last decade, discovered a document. It's a piece by Bohm, and it was copied down in the hand of a 15-year-old Bach. So on paper, from the Bohm household. So we are 99% certain that Bohm was a teacher, or at least a major influence on the organ to young Bach. So the Jesus Christus, Unser Heiland, and Vater, Unser im Himmelreich. The next piece on the program before the intermission is Nun komm der Heiland by Friedrich Wilhelm Zachow. Zachow was the organist in the Market Church in Halle an der Saale in eastern Germany. He's most well known as the teacher of Georg Friedrich Händel, or as we know in the Anglophone world, George Frederick Handel. He taught Handel to play the organ in the Market Church, and his instrument is still there. It's quite a small, little mid-17th century organ. It was unfortunately not destroyed in the Second World War, and many organists flocked there to hear the instrument. It has what's called a pull-down pedal, so there is no independent pedal division. There are leather strips from a pedal board that are connected to the keys, played with the hand. You push the pedal down and it pulls a key down. A very remedial system. However, it works for music of that period and in that part of the world. I'm going to play his chorale, Nun komm der Heiland. This is also a Lutheran chorale stemming from an earlier Gregorian melody. And this is a melody that would have been used throughout the German-speaking world, not so much in Austria where I'm at. The Catholic Church remained rather prominent in that area, even during the Reformation. However, you can find this melody all throughout Scandinavia and in the UK, and even in Portugal, one of the most Catholic countries. Even during the Reformation, this melody managed to make its way there in a altered version, not the original Gregorian version. So here is the Nun komm der Heiland, Come ye Saviors of the Nations. Many of you might be familiar with the tune. I will play the chorale melody first and then the prelude. The prelude is set up in what's called a Baroque partita. So you hear the initial statement of the theme, and then following that are three variations on that. One of them is in a different meter, and you hear a solo in the left hand with a reed, and it moves 4 times as fast as the melody in the right hand. And at the end, it is broken into a 2-part chorale. So you hear the choral melody by itself in the right hand, followed by a very vague accompaniment in the left hand. Thank you all for staying. The second half of the program features music of Johann Sebastian Bach. Mr. Bach revolutionized the art of organ playing in Germany and throughout continental Europe in the 18th century. And you'll hear an immediate difference in this half of the program from what you heard in the beginning. In contemporary sources, Bach was said to have been able to play with his feet as fast as his colleagues could play with their hands. So you'll see some very intense pedal solos in this half of the performance. But Bach was playing rather large instruments for his time in places like Mühlhausen, where they had a brand new organ, as well as in Weimar, where they what they called the Castle of Heaven, the chapel of the court there, with one of the most important organs of the region. The ceiling of the chapel was painted as the heavens, and the organ was hidden in a loft painted the same color as the ceiling. So when playing in this chapel that must have had the most spectacular acoustics, it sounded like the music of the organ was floating down from the heavenly painting on the ceiling. And you'll hear so many different colors and aspects of these pieces. After the initial prelude, you see 4 chorale preludes there. These are normally not done on recitals here in the States. However, they are some of my favorite pieces of music. I play what is called early music, which is different than mainstream classical music. The idea is to play generally music written before 1750, before the time of Bach's death. You can say in broad terms from the end of the Roman Empire in the 5th century up to the death of Bach. And the idea is to find available sources and available period instruments and perform this music as accurately as possible, or at least in a way that would not have sounded foreign to the original listener. So in mainstream classical music, what you can do is, as an artist, you say, okay, I select this piece to perform, and I understand what some of the modern traditions are on this piece, and I'm going to create my own interpretation of that. However, this approach is not valid in early music. You take what sources you have available. In many cases, you have to look for your own. I'm fortunate to work at a monastery with a music archive of 40,000 documents from before 1750. That makes things a little bit easier. And you're not trying to create something that is personal to you or new. You're simply performing this music in a way that would have not sounded foreign. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we do not have a period instrument here in Wheeling. However, this organ has so many spectacular capabilities with it. While it will be something foreign to the ears of an 18th century listener, I hope that I do these pieces justice, and I hope that I do this organ justice. In this first prelude in A minor, you will hear the louder spectrum of the organ, and at the end, the extreme loud spectrum of the organ. But you also hear with the following piece about how quiet this instrument can get. Flutes from various sides of the church. As you've noticed, there is sections of the organ up front, and there is an antiphonal division in the back. And so there is a chance you might hear a flute or two coming from the back of the church. So I'm going to play the prelude in A minor, followed by the chorale Du Friedefurst, Herr, Jesu Christ. The following three pieces on the program come from the collection Orgelbüchlein, which means little organ book, but don't be fooled. These are some of the most challenging choral preludes in the organ repertoire. The first one is Wir Christenleut, We Christian People, and this particular piece is supposed to be a representation of the entire Christian experience in about a minute and a half. A colleague of mine explains this piece this way. In this prelude, you hear the choral melody at the very top, played with this side of the right hand. And there is a cascading figure, played with this side of the right hand and this side of the left hand. And this is supposed to be souls cast into eternal damnation. And there is an accompanying figure played with this side of the left hand. However, there is a figure in the pedal that continually moves upwards. And the colleague of mine describes this as the theological redemption. And it's always an interesting piece to play. It's in very, very florid four-voice counterpoint. So music you might listen to today, you have to think of it as a sort of melody with an accompaniment, often on the radio guitar or whatever it may be, but there's a prominent melody and a not so important accompaniment. However, music of this time was contrapunto, and you have to understand it as melody against melody against melody against melody. So you have four going on at the same time, and it shows you what a mathematical genius Bach was, as well as his contemporaries, to create music that functions with so many voices. I have played 6-voice fugues before by Bach, and you would have to understand that all 6 independent voices work together at the same time and through the structure coordinate with one another. It's really quite a feat. The following chorale, O Lamm Gottes Unschuldig, Lamb of God without sin, it is a 2-voice canon. It's called a canon at the quint. And while you have the melody of the chorale going on in the feet, a fifth higher in a different key, one measure separated, it's going on in the left part of your right hand. And if that's not enough, you have 2 accompaniment figures going on with your left hand and the other side of your right hand. So while you have a canon going on, a 2-voice canon at the fifth, you have 2 independent voices accompanying that. And then lastly is the Wer nur den lieben Gott lässt walten, usually translated in Anglophone hymnals as If Thou But Suffer God to Guide Thee. Quite a popular hymn in the Lutheran as well as the Anglican tradition. And this is meant for organo pleno, which means as many stops as you see fit. And so I hope you enjoy these 3 choral preludes from the collection Orgelbüchlein. The final two pieces on the program are secular works. The Pastorale is a multi-movement piece. I'm going to play the first three movements. They're short, they're depicting pastoral scenes. You'll hear the reeds of the pastures in Germany. You'll also hear the fun dance of the German peasants in Thuringia. And you'll hear a solo aria, and you might again hear this antiphonal section in the back of the church. And that the recital concludes with the Prelude in C major, one of the 18 great preludes and fugues for the organ. Unfortunately, while it is a very beautiful piece, it is also the most uncomfortable piece to play for the organist. The very first measure opens with a cascade from the middle of the pedal board down to the very lowest note, and within two beats, the right hand plays what would have been at Bach's time the very highest note on the manual section of the organ. So you have the entire spectrum of the instrument in the very first measure, and these cascades in the pedals continue throughout, and towards the end there is a notoriously difficult pedal solo while your right hand is trilling, and that is followed by a cascade going up to complement the cascades at the beginning going down. And at the end of the piece, you'll get to hear a full organ. So if you were curious what this instrument here could do, you will hear it at the end of the Prelude in C major. Thank you for coming.